Douglas Feldman spent 15 years on death row, waiting for his fate. His crimes were so calculated and cold-blooded that prosecutors called him the poster child for the death penalty. He hunted down and murdered 2 innocent truck drivers in separate shootings, simply because they had angered him. Hit that like button and subscribe to be part of our growing community. Douglas Alan Feldman was born in 1958 in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. Unlike many who end up on death row, Douglas didn't come from poverty or disadvantage. His family was stable, his neighborhood decent, and he received a good education. He was exceptionally bright, graduating magna cum laude from Southern Methodist University with a degree in finance. By all appearances, Douglas Feldman was set up for success, but beneath the veneer of achievement, something darker lurked. Friends remembered him as intelligent but odd, charming one moment and unsettlingly cold the next. He struggled to maintain genuine connections, often burning bridges over perceived slights that others barely noticed. After graduation, Douglas worked as a financial analyst, but drifted from position to position. Coworkers described him as competent but difficult, someone who took offense easily and held disproportionate grudges. Small workplace disagreements would fester in his mind, growing into elaborate narratives of persecution. By his mid-20s, Douglas's life began showing cracks. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, his behavior grew increasingly erratic and aggressive. He couldn't hold down jobs, cycling through positions and blaming others for his failures. People said he seemed perpetually angry at the world, as if everyone had somehow wronged him. By the mid-1990s, Douglas's rage was no longer contained. In December 1996, a traffic collision turned violent when Douglas attacked the other driver with a ball-peen hammer, striking him at least 3 times. Then in May 1998, after refusing to pay at Keller's Hamburgers, he deliberately drove his car into a car hop, throwing her 20 feet through the air. She lost consciousness, lost teeth, and suffered serious injury. Douglas simply drove away. The day before his killing spree, on August 24, 1998, he drove to a Volkswagen dealership where he'd had work done 13 years earlier and opened fire on the building in broad daylight. Douglas Feldman was a ticking time bomb, riding around on his motorcycle with a 9mm pistol and hundreds of rounds of ammunition, looking for targets for his fury. On the evening of August 24, 1998, Douglas was riding his motorcycle along highways around Plano, Texas. Robert Everett crossed his path. Robert Stephen Everett was a 36-year-old truck driver from Missouri with a 12-year-old daughter, Emily, who adored her father. He was driving his 18-wheeler through Plano when he changed lanes, a routine maneuver. The truck came within 12 to 18 inches of Douglas's motorcycle. No contact was made, no accident occurred. But Douglas Feldman was not like most people. In that moment, something inside him snapped completely. He pulled out his 9mm pistol while riding and fired multiple shots into the back of Robert's trailer. Then he reloaded, accelerated alongside the cab, and opened fire directly at Robert through the window. 12 shots in total. Robert was hit multiple times and slumped over the wheel as his truck came to a stop. He died in his cab, alone, far from home, killed by a stranger for the crime of changing lanes. Douglas sped away on his motorcycle. But the night's horror wasn't over. Approximately 45 minutes later and 11 miles away, Douglas rode past a gas station in Irving, Texas. Nicolas Velasquez, a 62-year-old truck driver and grandfather, was refilling the station's underground fuel supply from his tanker truck. There was no provocation. Nicholas hadn't wronged him in any way, hadn't even interacted with him. Douglas pulled out his 9mm pistol and fired 4 shots at Nicholas's back as the older man worked. 2 bullets hit their target. Nicholas collapsed beside his truck and died there, murdered for no reason other than being in the wrong place. For 12 days, Douglas walked free while police desperately tried to solve the murders. Then, on September 5th, Douglas walked into a Burger King in Dallas and fired 3 shots at employee Antonio Vega. Antonio survived. A bystander noted Douglas's license plate number. The next day, police arrested Douglas. They found 2 firearms and nearly 300 rounds of ammunition. Ballistics confirmed the 9mm pistol was the murder weapon, but perhaps most chilling was what they found in jail. Douglas had written 81 letters to a former girlfriend, revealing the true depths of his depravity. "I have found it quite pleasurable to kill those two men," he wrote. "It feels wonderful to cause their death and to watch their pain." In another letter, "I have come to hate every single person on this planet with all my heart and soul. If I had a button which would kill every single person on this planet, I would push it with no hesitation whatsoever." The trial. At trial in 1999, Douglas offered essentially no alibi. The ballistics were undeniable. The weapon was definitively the murder weapon. His defense attempted to argue mitigation, pointing to mental health issues and psychiatric treatment he'd received in 1993 for drug abuse and paranoia. But those 81 letters destroyed any sympathy. Letter after letter was read aloud, each more disturbing than the last. Douglas writing about the pleasure of killing, expressing hatred for all of humanity, showing absolutely zero remorse. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence, witnesses, ballistics experts, and Douglas's own words. His defense called mental health experts who testified about his psychiatric history and rage issues. But the prosecution countered. How could someone who so eloquently described his pleasure in killing be too mentally ill to understand his actions? The jury found him guilty of capital murder. In August 1999, they sentenced him to death by lethal injection. 15 years on death row. Douglas was sent to the Polunsky unit in Livingston, Texas. 60-square-foot concrete cells where inmates spent 23 hours a day in isolation. This was where Douglas would spend the next 15 years waiting to die. His time on death row was marked by defiance. He racked up on 36 disciplinary violations, one of the worst records in the Texas prison system. He fought with guards, destroyed property, and was eventually banned from media access after violently ripping a telephone from the wall before a scheduled interview. But beneath the defiance was something even more disturbing. Douglas showed no remorse for his crimes. None. He didn't write letters of apology. He didn't express regret. He didn't attempt any jailhouse conversion. He seemed to believe his victims had deserved their fate, that he'd been justified, that the world had wronged him. As the years passed, his appeals slowly worked through the court system, but courts consistently upheld his conviction and sentence. By 2013, after nearly 15 years, his appeals had run out. His execution date was set, July 31, 2013. The final day. July 31, 2013, arrived with oppressive Texas heat. Douglas, now 55 years old with grayer, thinner hair, woke for his last day alive. After final visits and a standard prison meal, he was transported from Polunsky to the Huntsville unit for execution. At approximately 6:15 p.m., guards escorted Douglas into the execution chamber. Despite his earlier defiance, witnesses reported he looked very nervous, his breathing rapid and shallow, his body tense. Prosecutor Jason January would later say he'd never seen anyone look as scared. Guards strapped Douglas to the gurney and inserted the IV line. Warden Lewis Jones asked if he had any final words. In a trembling but clear voice, Douglas declared, "I hereby declare Robert Stephen Everett and Nicholas Velasquez guilty of crimes against me, Douglas Alan Feldman. Either by fact or by proxy, I find them both guilty. I hereby sentence both of them to death, which I carried out in August 1998. As of that time, the state of Texas has been holding me illegally in confinement and by force for 15 years. I hereby protest my pending execution and demand immediate relief." Even at the end, even with his final breath approaching, he showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, no recognition of the pain he'd caused. Robert Everett's brother John would later say Douglas's statement showed the heart of the man. Very dark and very evil and very unremorseful. The warden signaled to the executioner. The lethal drug pentobarbital began flowing through the IV. Douglas's breathing became more rapid, almost panicked. His feet twitched. He grimaced twice. Then he took several deep breaths, each one slower than the last. A snoring sound began as his body shut down. Then nothing, all movement stopped. Just 13 minutes after the injection began, a physician confirmed, Douglas Alan Feldman was dead. Robert Everett's daughter Emily, who had been 12 when her father was murdered, told reporters, "Now I'm grown, married, with kids, and my dad didn't get to see any of that. I feel my dad finally has justice after 15 years. Prosecutor Jason January observed, clearly, as we've seen from his history, his hundreds of violations, and today in his final defiant act of insulting the victims on his death gurney, it showed he didn't have road rage, he had life rage. For the families of Robert Everett and Nicholas Velasquez, The execution brought a measure of closure, though it could never truly heal the wounds. Robert had been dead for 15 years, his daughter growing up without him. Nicholas had been murdered for no reason at all. No execution could bring them back. Douglas Feldman became the 11th person executed in Texas in 2013. But for those who knew the case, Douglas represented something particularly intelligent person who chose evil not out of desperation or mental illness, but out of a profound narcissism that saw other human beings as objects deserving death for minor inconveniences. He'd lived as a narcissist and died as one, convinced to his last breath that he was the real victim. But was justice truly served? Does the death penalty offer real closure to victims' families, or does it just add another death to the toll? What do you think? Does the death penalty deliver justice, or does it perpetuate a cycle of violence? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and if this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the cases that haunt us.